What's happening, model makers? It is the 2nd of August, and it feels like forever since I've been in front of the camera. I almost don't know how to act. But I have been kind of stuck in the doldrums of summer and just grinding through the miserable heat out here on the high plains, and my video making mojo has just been kind of low. Actually, my mojo in general has been a little bit low. But I have continued to grind along at my bench, although not with quite as much of my normal fervor. And I have just finished a project. So it was time to do a video, whether it was too hot or not. So that's what we're here for. Now, you guys, if you've put up with much of my nonsense, you may remember somewhere, I don't know, 20 or 30 episodes back, I did the first part of a review on the Revell 132nd Spitfire Mark II. Basically, you know, my usual thing where I build a certain amount of the kit and then do a review of it to talk about what I've seen with it so far, and just give a general overview, and then I normally finish up with the completed project. Now, at the time, if you watch that, you remember that I said that the Spitfire was actually going to be the donor kit for a ridiculous kit bashing project, where I was going to build what has come to be called by Gil Mondragon and Haken Gooney and a few other guys as Aero Phantasma, which is basically a car plane, where you essentially take the fuselage of some kind of a cool airplane and put some wheels on it and make a car plane. And there's been quite a few of these that have been done really well, some really cool stuff. And I have been kind of obsessed with the idea of creating my own, but with one caveat, and that being that because of my relentless engineering brain, the condition I placed on myself was that I wasn't going to do one until I could figure out a way to make it mechanically plausible. In other words, I wanted it to be such that when pretty much anybody looked at it, they could go, okay, I can see how that might work. Maybe not good, but that it might work nonetheless. Some of the other ones, most of the other ones that I've seen, with only a few exceptions, have been really cool looking, but basically somebody took a fuselage and stuck some wheels on the side of it and called it good. And it looks cool, but again, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, now how do they actually get power to those wheels? So, anyway, I set about searching for a kit that I could make the Revell Spitfire fuselage with that not only allowed me the appropriate mechanical components, but that also was going to be big enough, because I knew I was pretty much going to be stuck with the 35th scale. And I wanted the wheels to be as big and gnarly as possible. So, what I ended up selecting was the AFV Club AEC Matador gun truck, which, if you've never seen it, is this right here. Now, this is a really amazing kit. I was going to do my normal two-part review thing on it, but then I realized that it was going to end up in the same place as the Spitfire when it was all said and done. And when I kind of got to the point where I sort of felt like doing it because I had other things going on, I had built basically 60% of the kit and had a really good idea of what it was like, but I'd also made a few modifications. So I kind of didn't feel like it was right to present it when it was almost not recognizable for what it was. So what I'm going to do is just tell you very quickly that this AFV Club kit is really cool. The detail in it and is phenomenal. I don't know if it says here on this box what the part count is. Let's see here. Does it say? Does it say? I don't see anywhere on here, but it's a lot. It reminded me a lot of the Mini Art D7 Cat Bulldozer, because the thing pretty much goes together like the real thing would, and it has all the parts that you would see, for example, if you were looking at the underside of one of these trucks. So, very cool. So I picked it because it had the right kind of detail, because it was big enough, you know, being a big burly four-wheel drive truck. It had big enough wheels. And also, really important for me was that it was period correct to go with the Spitfire. Because the story that I cooked up in my head for this thing was, imagine if World War II had ended much later and much more differently. I.e. that maybe the Nazis had figured out their own atomic bomb, that Europe had basically become a post-nuclear wasteland where scavengers were roaming the countryside in these ridiculous vehicles looking for parts and food and supplies. And so I built the whole thing with that kind of a scenario in mind. So, using what might be available, using what techniques might still be in existence, given that industrial capacity had been reduced to something like what you would have found in the 1920s. So, for example, no aluminum welding, because that requires bottled gases that probably wouldn't have been available in a situation like this. And I purposely wanted to build the thing in a kind of cobbed-together fashion where it was purely functional, no hyperbole whatsoever. So that's why I picked the AFV Club kit. Now, that is a pretty expensive kit, especially for a project like this. It's about $60. But I feel like it was totally worth it, whether you're going to use it for something like this or whether you're building it all by itself, because it really is a very cool kit. The only real issues that I had with it were that there were a few places where it had fit issues. Places where there was supposed to be a hole for something to go into and the hole wasn't there and you had to drill it. And some really kind of horrific instructions. I'll show you real quickly what I mean about the instructions. They are from CAD drawings, which is a good thing. But they, like some of our other friends out there, really are afraid of using too much paper, and so they've crammed a lot onto each page. And the illustrations really are just too small and too cramped for you to really be able to look at them easily and see the orientation of some of these tiny little parts. In fact, I found myself looking at the instructions through my Optivisor as often as not, just to make sure that I wasn't doing something stupid. So that really is kind of my only beef with this kit, and I would recommend it. It is pretty neat if you're into that sort of project. So that's kind of the basic story of what I was attempting to do here and what I chose for this kit bashing project. I also designed and had printed some 3D printed parts for this project. And you're going to see all of that here in just a second, because as usual, I've got a whole little slideshow for you here of what I've accomplished, and then I'll come back after that and talk a little bit more about the project itself. All right, so let's go. Let's have a look.
This is your fate on Earth.
Check it out, check it out, bring it on, come on, come on, check it out, check it out. My name is Crash, so I'm running out flash like a blinded flare. Don't look away cause I'm already in there. I've been there, wherever you stare. I've been there longer than you care to remember. Buried deep inside you, now you must step to accept all the past behind you. Pain, breathing pain, and it's back again. Only the scars in your brain remain, so you look for a bend. You consent to escape what's gone. And now I'm on, and from the nipple to the needle to the bundle, and you're never satisfied. For these crimes it must be tried, you can't hide. Cause I'm reality, your birthright is a word of insanity. Disconnected legacy, and you will never see an end to the global savagery. Continuing to feed your desire for more, but deep down you know that you can never find what you're looking for's gone. And you can't fight back, and now your senses are under attack. So you act automatic, return to the frantic nation of addicts. Reduced to the manic, false erratic, solemn doped up slaves and servants of greed. Because you are born into the age of panic, into an 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 age of panic, into the age of panic, into the age of panic, into an age of panic. So familiar, the words fill you with dread and then kill you dead. Stone cold in your stride, I feel a hole in your soul around 50 miles wide. I'm a contradiction each time you speak. I keep you weak and I can down at your feet. I am the path that you can never reconcile. You're right here but you're living in exile. Walking in cities of stone, the shadows grow. Thousands of people but you're all alone in your own little zone like a drone. Walking in hides all your lives bound down to the throne. The overlords and in your own image. And each that ties you in the global village. Now you're finished, dependent, lost in a maze. Your days as you stare at the glowing blaze of rays. The future pulses in a computer. I knew now that suits you. Inherited chaos now instilled as I will. And now I just wait for the killers and born into the age of panic. Into an age of panic. Born into an age of panic. Into an age of panic. Born into the age of panic. Into an age of panic. Born into an age of panic. Into an age of panic.
Okay, so there you go. That's where I ended up with this thing. This project was really a lot of fun. It ended up kind of taking on a life of its own, being a little more difficult than I expected it to be. But I learned a lot, and I did have fun, and I guess that's really the true measure of success with any of this stuff. So let me see if I can pass on some of that stuff to you guys. Now, I guess first of all, I'll just start with telling you, well, I'll just start at the front. Because that for me was kind of the focal point of the project. As you can see from the photographs, I've got this thing hanging down here from the front end. And there's a drive shaft underneath there that connects that, which is a gearbox, to the front end of the Matador's transmission. So the idea being that we took the engine out of the Matador and then replaced it with this ridiculous drivetrain to get power from the Merlin down to the chassis of the truck. So this gearbox and the U-joints for this drive shaft are parts that I designed myself using Rhino 3D for Mac, and I just want to thank George Taylor big time for not only turning me on to Rhino for the Mac, but giving me some good pointers along the way. It really is a good package, and I was able to design these parts with just a little bit of a learning curve and get them off to the 3D printer. And the 3D printer that I used for these was Reed Oak in France. And I picked him because he uses a machine called a Perfactory 4 that's about $100,000, and it does fantastic, produces fantastic results. His main claim to fame is figures, and if you look back in my video catalog, you'll see a review of his stuff, and you'll see the amazing work he does with figures. So I knew his machine had the resolution for what I wanted, and it turned out to be a really good decision. I did not do any finishing work on any of these printed parts. If you look close enough, you would see that there are some build layer lines there that I probably could have and should have sanded out, but I decided they weren't so visible that I really wanted to put the energy into doing that. So no harm, no foul. But that, is one of the deals with 3D printed parts. On something that's really slab-sided like that, that's where you're going to see those type of artifacts. When you're building something like a figure that's got lots of wrinkles in the clothing, those things really get lost in the noise, and so it's really a good technology for that sort of thing. But anyway, you can kind of see down in here what's going on. The drive shaft is a piece of stainless steel tubing that slips over a piece of brass tubing, and then those are super glued to their respective parts of the U-joints. And you can see down inside there where I've basically just kit bashed some parts into something resembling some sort of an attachment point for the front of the transmission. Now, if we kind of flip around here to the other side, you can see some more details. One thing is this tank right here that you can see that's got a couple of hoses leading up inside the cowling. Now what that is there's a coolant tank on the front end of a Merlin that normally sits underneath the cowling right here. But I figure I need some sort of mechanical structure to secure this gearbox to, and in my mind, we built that up underneath this cowling and attached it to the front of the engine carriers. So that's what keeps this gearbox in place, and that meant that we had to move the coolant tank down here and run some hoses up inside. And so those hoses are lead wire with little pieces of brass tubing slipped over it to mimic the fittings. And that's just a piece of evergreen channel that I put on there as a bracket, whatever you want to call it, that would have been welded on the front of the chassis for that tank to sit on. Now, something else that you may notice is down in there. You can see it right in there underneath the cooling hoses. Is this gizmo with a couple of hoses coming out of it. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to accomplish with this is I wanted to represent all of the major mechanical systems that would contribute to the drivability of the vehicle. And obviously one of those things is steering. And I did not want to try and come up with some kind of a mechanical steering linkage, so I went to my farm boy knowledge base and decided on a hydraulic steering system. And so what I've kind of cobbed together in here, you can see the hose runs back to a gizmo that's right next to the entrance point for the drive shaft. And so what that is a hydraulic pump that's attached to the front of the transmission. And you can imagine that it runs off some gears or whatever that are internal there and provides hydraulic pressure to this hydraulic steering motor here, and that's what those hoses are for. And that is pretty much exactly the way like an old John Deere 4010 or pretty much any other normal farm tractor has its steering operated, so I figure it's plausible. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see under here, and I'm pretty sure it didn't show in the photographs, but if you look underneath there are things that approximate the linkages for the clutch, the shifter, and if we flip back around over here to the other side, there are brake lines, and you can see that the air brake system has a big reservoir, and that feeds up into the insides of the fuselage as well. I kind of am stumbling on my words here because just as I reached around and grabbed that, yep, I broke one of the headlights off. These headlights, I tell you, they've just been a running disaster. I wanted it to have headlights, and I decided that I would just use the ones from the Matador kit, and I decided that it would kind of be cool to have glossy red ones like they came off of some kind of a car as, just a kind of a counterpoint to all this wear and tear. And so the first thing I had to do with these stupid headlights, this is really ridiculous, and I'm so mad that I just broke one off. They did not have much of a stem on them, which is why this one was so easy to snap off. And what I did is I added a little piece of styrene rod to make the stem longer that pokes into a hole that's drilled into the side of the fuselage there. And then that's a piece of lead wire, obviously, for the electrical connection. Then I decided to paint them with some Tamiya red paint and clear coat them with just some Future because that was easy. Well, for whatever reason, it never wanted to harden up, and I didn't really figure that out until I'd already painted the insides of the stupid thing silver, and I was about ready to put the lenses on. So I had to strip the paint off, and in the process of stripping the paint off of these itty-bitty things, I broke one of those little extensions off. So I glued it back on, and I reinforced it with a piece of brass tubing and a bunch of super glue, which clearly was not enough to really do the job. Then I repainted them with Tamiya thinned with lacquer thinner and threw a coat of clear lacquer on them. Then, after I had gotten that done and decided it was going to put the lenses in, I realized that the lenses that I thought came out of the kit to go in there were not the correct ones, and that the lenses that do go in were just basically flat sheets of clear styrene. So I took them and I scribed a crosshatch pattern in the damn lenses and glued them in, then added the wire and attached them to the fuselage. So anyway, yeah, that's the ridiculous story of the stupid headlights. Another thing that you'll notice is the exhausts from the Revell Spitfire kit. This Revell Spitfire kit just really, in my opinion, is not so great. It's a good value, I guess, for the money, but in terms of kit quality, it really is pretty mediocre in my opinion, and I think that goes along with what I said in the first part of the review for it. One of the really annoying things about it is that even though they give you these exhausts as a two-piece part so that you can allegedly have hollow exhaust tips, they're so poorly molded that if you really want that, you end up having to drill those out and grind them out anyway to make them look decent, and that's exactly what I had to do there. I ended up using a dental burr on my Proxxon to hollow the ends of those out, and they came out good, but still pretty annoying. Okay, now another thing that's on here that I had to connect was I wanted to connect to this big fuel tank. So you can see there's a fuel line that runs from it up into the inside of the fuselage as well. Now, going back to the cooling thing, you can see that there's some more of that system right here. I've moved the radiator from underneath the wing because there is no wing anymore, and I needed some coolant lines to run up to connect with the engine. And you can see that I've got brass fittings, and I used little strips of foil from, I think it was a Scalpel package actually. It's a little heavier duty than regular aluminum foil to create the brackets that are there to hold those coolant lines in place. Now, continuing on a little further back, I guess I should just talk about the fenders. I wanted to have fenders. Those are just bits from the kit that allowed me to attach them to some scratch-built supports there. And that was really kind of the only concession I made to aesthetics, was in the way that I chose to mount the fenders and kind of give it a sort of aggressive monster truck kind of look, I suppose. Now, again, underneath here, you can see I've added some of the storage bins and things from the Matador, and also around on this side you can see that I've got a little storage bin underneath that has like just some just imagine some findings that you've scrounged up in your journey, stashed away in there. I kind of cobbed together a little radio-looking thing. Got some jerry cans from the Matador kit. Just various objects that I felt like would add interest. That boarding ladder right there is scratch built out of evergreen styrene stock, which is just really handy stuff. I felt like I needed to have a little bit of the human touch. I figured this guy might need a satchel full of supplies, and I thought that was a pretty good place to hang it. And that strap is actually made using a trick that I learned from Matt McDougall. That is the edge of a dollar bill that's sliced off and threaded through those extra buckles from an HGW kit. And that dollar bill material just works really well. It's more of a fabric than a paper. It soaks up washes really nice. It's super easy to manipulate, and definitely not the last time I'll be using that trick. Now, when you look inside, you can see the other thing that I really felt like was important was making sure that the cockpit reflected all of the mechanicals that it would take to operate this stupid thing. And that includes the steering wheel from the Matador, and it's kind of hard to see in there, but there is a shift lever, and then another lever with a linkage on it as well on the other side for, I don't know, the clutch or something, whatever. Anyway, it's in there, and you can't see them, but there are foot pedals in there as well for the clutch and the brakes. So, I felt like I met my goal of making it at least mechanically plausible. Now, structurally, I felt like I needed something here in the back for the fuselage to attach to, and so I just fabricated this framework support structure using once again evergreen. Now that chain there is pretty cool. That comes from a company called Tank Workshop, which they make several different sizes of them, and they're all really cool. But they don't come with any hooks. And so, because I already had ordered some 3D printed hooks from Shapeways for my Cat D7 project, I still had some more, and I used those on here as well. And that's a pretty cool deal. If you're not familiar with Shapeways, one thing they do is they have a store where designers can upload their own parts and you can purchase them. And so Matt McDougall had found these hooks, and I was able to just basically with a couple of clicks get those for I don't know, it was like $8 or $10. So a very cool deal with those to be able to add those onto the chain. The surface finish on them isn't quite as good as parts from Reed Oak, but they definitely look the part. Now, it's kind of tough to see in there, but there's also a winch, and you can see the eyelet on the end of it right there, and that's a piece of thread that runs up to the winch spool that's up underneath there. You can probably kind of see that. Anyway, I think that pretty much accounts for all of the construction elements of the project. I think I probably mentioned in the first installment of the video that on the cockpit I used some HGW German seat belts because, again, I wanted it to be, like something that was scrounged and not necessarily the exact correct RAF belts for a Spitfire. So, anyway, I think that accounts for just about everything. Maybe the only thing I didn't mention is these plates for the ends of the wings and this plate for the back end of the tail, just sheet styrene, and then what I did to make the rivets or the bolts, whatever you want to call them, is I just used my UMM punch and die set to kick out a bunch of those and glued them on there with Tamiya extra thin to give me the appearance of some fasteners. Same thing with the base of the radiator there, where it's mounted to the side of the fuselage. So, again, I think that pretty well covers all of the construction aspects. But one of the real important reasons to me that I want to do this project was because I knew that it would just be a lot of fun to do the weathering and create the basic look that I wanted to with paint, and it definitely was. The kind of starting at the bottom with the chassis. Oh, I forgot. Speaking of the chassis, these are DEF model wheels, which are built specifically for this kit. But in typical DEF model fashion, even though they're beautiful, they don't quite fit. Had to drill out the centers. Kind of was a hassle, but definitely worth it because you can see the detail on those where they've got everything molded in. Anyway, so starting with those kind of on the weathering, I painted everything on the chassis in my favorite rust mixture of Stynylrez primer, and then I went to chipping it, and I have been, it seems like, doing nothing but massive amounts of chipping for the last 3 months, and I've learned a lot. And one of the things that I think I've concluded at this point is that for me and for the process that I've dialed in, that the best chipping fluid is going to be hairspray. And I'm specifically using the Tresemme medium hold. Now, does that really specifically make any difference? Probably not. But I use that because that's what Michael Rinaldi recommends in his books, and I was trying to keep the process as similar as possible. And it does work pretty well. So the chipping was all done using some lightened Tamiya olive drab that was left over from my B25 Mitchell project. And then once I got all the chipping done, then it was time to add a bunch of dirt and grime to the chassis. And one of my favorite things for that is I wanted a fairly thin kind of dirt and mud mixture. So I mixed up some of Ultimate Modeling Products light dirt clay wash with spackling compound. And I mix it thin enough that I can use a toothbrush to splatter it on. And I just really love the way that works. But before I did that, I also did several chipping layers using various shades of tan and brown on the undersides of those fenders and on the chassis as well. So once I had all of that done and had everything kind of muddy and dirty and filthy, then I also did I used some oil blending to create some dust effects in various places around the chassis as well. The tires are kind of my standard thing of giving them a base coat, a black that's about a 90% mixture of black and 10% white. And then I did 2 or 3 layers of chipping with various opacities and tones of tan and brown, just like I did on the chassis, because I wanted them to match. And I'm really pleased with the way that those came out. One of my struggles has been to get small, subtle effects with chipping fluid. In the past, I just feel like my paint has just wanted to fly off like it was atmospheric re-entry, and I've gradually refined my process to the point where I can get pretty subtle effects. And it really is, I'm not going to get into all of that right now. I'm going to do a separate video about chipping probably later this week, but there's a bunch of variables, and it really comes down to how much water you use, your brush technique, and timing. So I'm pleased that I feel like I've finally started to settle into a predictable routine on that. Okay, now on the fuselage, lots and lots of layers and chipping. What I did to start out with was I primed it using my go-to primer, which is Stynylrez. I primed it in black, and then came over the top of it with a layer of Vallejo metal color white aluminum. And at that point, I did a little bit of modeling work using a sponge and some other shades of aluminum to reflect kind of the oxidation that you would see on the top surface of something that had been sitting out like that for years and years. And once I was happy with that, then I came over that with a nice layer of aqua gloss. And the reason I did that was because aqua gloss is super tough. And what I did not want to happen was that once I started doing the heavy chipping on the paint, I didn't want to run the risk of blowing all the way through it into the into the base primer color or even the plastic, because I knew that part of my technique with this was also going to be using sandpaper to wear and fade the paint. So I felt like it was really important to make sure that the aluminum was super sturdy. But one thing about chipping fluid is that it works a lot better, it's a lot more controllable if you use it on top of a matte finish. So I came over the top of that layer of aqua gloss with a coat of Tester's Dull Coat that I airbrushed on. At that point, I was ready to go, and I just started laying on my layers and chipping them. Now, Rinaldi is obviously the guru of chipping, and he would have said do all of your painting and chipping fluid first and then start chipping. And what he means specifically by that is do your first color layer, spray chipping fluid, do your second color layer, spray some more chipping fluid, and so on until you have all the layers that you're going to want, and then do the chipping. But I was too much of a scaredy cat to try that. So I chipped each color individually, and I started out with a zinc chromate green that I mixed up myself using some Tamiya. The dudes on Scale Modelers Critique Group, some of them gave me a hard time. They didn't think it was the right color, but I can show with photographs that there are a bunch of different shades of zinc chromate green and yellow, and it really wasn't going to be that important because it was going to be the bottom color layer. Once I had it chipped down, then I sprayed on another layer of chipping fluid and came and masked off my the earth color for the camouflage. Sprayed that on. Then, well, I didn't mask the earth. I just sprayed that freehand, then masked so that I could spray the RAF dark green. And once I had the camouflage laid down, I chipped all of that, and then I just kind of used the previously exposed paint as kind of my roadmap for where to go. And once I had all of that done, then I came with the Matador RAF insignia masking kit and did my insignia, did all 4 colors of the insignia, and then I chipped them, and then came along with some leftover Montex masks for the call letters, and sprayed those and then masked them. Obviously, I put down a layer of hairspray before I sprayed all of the markings. And then once everything was chipped down the way I wanted it, then I started in on my usual pattern of working with washes and oils directly on the paint to create the effects that I was after. So lots of Winsor and Newton oil effects to kind of create these dark stains around some of the panel line boundaries to create some tonal variation within the paint. Like you can see right here where I've got I've got the zinc chromate showing underneath, as well as some variety in the top coat colors. I also sprayed on the exhaust stains using some Tamiya smoke. And the exhaust stains, I tried not to make them as they would have been if this were an aircraft in flight, because obviously it's not. It's going 30 miles an hour instead of 300 miles an hour, and I wanted to not only reflect that, but the fact that it's probably running on some really cheap, lousy, low-octane fuel at this point in its life, and so I tried to create an exhaust stain that reflected that. Once I had all of that done, then I came over it with a nice uniform layer of aqua gloss, which I like to do just to make sure that everything is going to be super sealed and durable, and that I don't ever have to worry about scratches and nicks and things like that. And then once I had that done, I sprayed another layer of Tester's Dull Coat. And that got me pretty close to the end, but I had a couple of things I wanted to add to it. One is I wanted to hand paint the number on there, and I don't think I could have done a much better job if I'd tried to, but I purposely wanted it to look pretty shoddy. And that, of course, is also my old motocross racing number 19, so always going to use that. I also came back at that point with some pigments, specifically some airfield dust in some different places, and some of Ushi van der Rosten's metal powders to create the wear on the shiny spots, shiny parts of the ladder, and then give a little bit of a shinier appearance to the aluminum right there at the wing root where there's lots of foot traffic. So I think that pretty well covers it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more subtleties and complications, as we all know, that took place over really what was about a month or so of just solid painting and weathering. But that is the basic story. Okay, so there you go. There is what I have affectionately called the spitador for the last 3 or 4 months. And as you can see, it was quite a bit of silliness and quite a bit of model making adventure. But, you know, what an amazing learning experience. This thing pretty much covered the entire gamut. You know, basic modeling skills to get the Revell kit together in a reasonable fashion, because there was some seam filling that had to be done. I will say this, the wing root joint on that kit was probably one of the tightest that I've ever seen in all my years of model making. I really did not need to use any filler on it at all. And that was nice to not have to do that or do any rescribing. So I'll give Revell credit where it's due on that, even though I think overall it's not a great kit. But at any rate, it did encompass all of those basic modeling skills. Did some scratch building. It collects elements of both aircraft and armor model making. Did some 3D printing. Basically the entire smorgasbord of weathering techniques and tricks that I've learned at this point. So I would say, this thing has been quite a skill test, and I actually feel pretty proud of it. I feel like it's unique, and I feel like I feel like it was worth the effort on my part to try and make it where it was mechanically plausible and to pay attention to those details. And I'm glad I spent the time on it that I did. I hope that if you guys disagree, obviously you'll let me know. But I also hope that it kind of inspires you to kind of, break out of your own comfort zone and try something weird and bizarre and stupid like this that really pushes your skills and your imagination and really, greases the creative wheels, because I think that's what ultimately keeps this kind of hobby fun and fresh. So if you're suffering from lack of mojo and need something different to do, building a car plane is definitely one way you can solve that problem. So at any rate, I will stop rambling. I think I've gone on far long enough as it is. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out my stuffs. And I hope, as always, that it was informative and maybe a little bit entertaining too. All right, guys, much love. Take care.